más nadie.
Gente de zona, una vez más, homenaje a Bárbaro de Ritmo.
Keiko Forever y Alexander.
Ahí nada más.
Nando Bro. La mafia musical.
Ponle, vamos allá.
Castellano, qué bueno baila usted.
Mano para arriba otra vez.
Castellano, qué bueno baila usted.
En homenaje para Benny Joel.
Dale.
Castellano, qué bueno baila usted.
Y no me diga que no, que yo me enteré.
Castellano.
Hola a todos. Muchas gracias por estar aquí hoy en esta conferencia virtual de Florida Alas. Mi nombre es Cristian Mesa y hoy yo soy un estudiante del University of North Florida. Me acabo de graduar y ahora soy un sophomore. Les quiero dar gracias a todos ustedes por estar aquí hoy para promover el tema de esta conferencia, Adelante, Empowering All. Gracias a todos por estar aquí y ahora quiero que todos ustedes, por favor, if you would join me para el juramento de la bandera de lealtad, por favor. Juro lealtad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Muchas gracias. Ahora quiero presentar a los Board of Directors de Florida Alas para sus comentarios.
Thank you very much. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes, queridos primos y primas, and our cousins also. Welcome everyone to this great conference. My name is Angel Gomez, and I am the present president. Let's say how it is. I am the outgoing president for Florida Alas, and it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Belinda Reyes, and I am the outgoing Vice President of Florida Alas. Thank you so much for joining us. We're better together.
And hello, everybody. My name is Enrique Vela. I'm the treasurer for Florida Alas, and we are going to get the interaction started right here, right now with our welcoming ritual. When we think of the phrase equity for all, that seems like a very superhuman feat. But I feel confident because I know I have an army of primos from Florida Alas who all have equity superpowers. Some of us are talkers, some are movers, some are collaborators, but each and every one has an equity superpower. So right now, I want each and every one of you introduce yourselves in the chat box and let us know your equity superpower. All right, great. And as people keep trickling in, let's keep introducing ourselves. And if you think of more superpowers, go ahead and put them in. And when I think of an equity super warrior, I definitely have the next person whose career we're going to celebrate in mind.
And that's just only half of it. This incredible leader is just inspirational. Dr. Margarita Pinkos was an assistant superintendent for global education and community outreach in the school district of Palm Beach County, with over 30 years of her career dedicated to teachers and students, not only at the local and state and national, but international level. Her professional journey started in 1984 as an elementary school teacher, where then she became a school principal, a district level executive director, assistant deputy secretary, and director of the Office of English Language Acquisition in the United States Department of Education. She also served as the president of the Florida Association of Bilingual and ESOL Supervisors and served in the board of the directors for the National Association of Bilingual Education. And this is incredible. In 2013, the King of Spain bestowed Dr. Pinkos the Royal Order of Isabel the Catholic, the highest civil honor awarded by the government of Spain. So on behalf of Florida Alas, we honor you, Dr. Pinkos, for the incredible work you have done over the past years to help ensure that all of our students have a world-class education. Dr. Pinkos?
Hola, gracias a todos. Esto es una sorpresa inesperada porque yo había dicho, yo no quiero hacer nada, yo no quiero hacer ningún fuss, tú sabes. Estos 37 years han sido mi regalo, ¿no? Y sobre todo seguir manteniéndome activa y seguir participando y seguir advocando por los chicos. Alas ha sido para mí un gran pilar en mi carrera y estoy viendo todos mis queridos amigos y que están aquí, los del Estado, que los quiero con el alma y ya veo las fotos esas salieron del archivo de muchos de ustedes, ¿no? Y que hemos sido hermanos, yo no diría primos, yo diría hermanos en esta guerra, pero también nacionalmente vi que estaba Dr. Armstrong, está Hector, está, no sé, no me fijé si ha habido otra persona, pero que me llevo bien. Y Hector, la verdad que tremendo pelo que te has echado, ¿no? Entonces es un gusto, ha sido un placer y lo único que espero es que esta organización se siga fortaleciendo. Hay muy pocas organizaciones a nivel nacional que hacen este trabajo y es el trabajo más necesario que tenemos. Los números nuestros siguen creciendo, en nuestro distrito somos 37% y tenemos muy poca representación y hay veces que hay que decir las verdades que son difíciles de decir. Y ha sido mi carrera, he sido afortunadamente, he podido decir las verdades que hay que decir y las continuaré diciendo ahora en mi retiro. Así que encantada a todos y bueno, ha sido un placer.
Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Y también tenemos un regalito para usted, nada más que no podíamos llegar a tu casa hoy, pero Dr. Washington Collado, él tiene un regalo para usted. Dr. Washington, do you want to hold up the beautiful plaque?
And the plaque says, in recognition for your tireless work over the years, promoting equity, and Margarita, you've done that, and of course, for dignifying educational communities across the nation. When I send up, I'm gonna put up the picture of the plaque because you're so deserving of that, and we are so pleased to present it to you.
And again, it's my pleasure. And I'm seeing also others that have to be celebrated. And of course, you know, Nino has always been, you know, right next to me. But I see Vicky Saldara is in the group and she just received the NAVE Administrator of the Year. She received a scholarship from NAVE and she was celebrated in NAVE. And Patricia Ordóñez y Patricia Trejo, las dos Patricia están representando a Palm Beach County muy bien en Florida Alas. So I tell you, there is a lot to celebrate around here.
Oh, gracias.
Courtesy of Florida Alas, and I celebrate you as an educator and as a friend.
Bueno, qué bello. Y tú sabes que los honores cuando vienen de dar a los que se quiere son los más importantes. Y esa es la parte más importante de esto. Y cada vez que lo vea me acordaré de todos ustedes. Y en las conversaciones que sigamos teniendo, doing the, what is it that Representative Lewis used to say, getting the good trouble, you know, so as we continue to get the good trouble, I'll always remember each and every one of you. And I may call you whenever I need help.
Gracias. Otro round of applause para la señora Dr. Margarita Pinkos. Whoop, whoop. And now we have in the Zoom room our very own executive director of the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. We're always so delighted to have her with us, always very supportive. So we would like to introduce her. If you haven't had the privilege of meeting her, welcome, Dr. Armstrong.
Gracias, Patricia. On behalf, I just have to open up by saying on behalf of the ALAS Board of Directors, I want to thank you all for joining Florida ALAS. And a special note también that we need to give a huge, huge thank you to Patricia and her behind the scenes crew, because we know what it takes, the effort that it requires to put on such an event. And we also want to thank the support of in-kind services by Education Elements. They have, right alongside with Patricia and crew, have made sure. So with that said, with Flawless, we heard all us again, we want to share with you that we've had to do a pivot just like everybody else out there. And we hope that the services that we have provided this past year have been ones that have brought us closer together como una familia. And we also want to make sure that you all are aware, because I'm going to give that shameless plug. We've got a couple of events coming in DC, and 2022, start marking your calendars. You'll be out here where I am right now in Puerto Rico for our October summit. So start planning. Please visit our ALAS website for all of the support and services that we enjoy bringing to you in each one of the states. Y otra vez, muchísimas gracias por tenerme aquí hoy.
Gracias. And now we have our incredible academic instructors. I have to say, Angel Gomez, isn't it awesome to have our academic instructors here with us in the Zoom room? Dr. Hector Montenegro and Dr. Franco here with us.
I'm so excited myself that we're here, because this time we got them to come to our meeting. We always go to their meeting on Saturday and Sunday and Friday. Guess what? Now you're coming to our meeting. We're so happy that you two are here. Thank you so much. And to the rest of the SLA 10 family who is here, I see you sputtered around. Thank you guys so much.
SLA Quarantine. SLA Quarantine.
Yeah, quarantine. Exactly right.
All right, Dr. Montenegro, it's all yours.
Great, and Carmella is here with us as well. And I'm going to tell you, it's just been an absolute pleasure working with cohort 10. As they say, 10 is the best. And you have really done well in preparing to become future superintendents. And that's the tribute that ALAS has established. For the last 10 years, 10 cohorts have really resulted in some very significant leaders throughout the country, beginning in New York City to throughout the country, where ALAS has really produced some great leadership. So Carmella and I are going to be reflecting just a little bit about the history of ALAS and the development of the Leadership Academy as well. But I think we have a video, but before I do, I really want to take personal privilege to congratulate Margarita Pinkos for your excellent service, the great job that you have done. I know you're going to continue to go on and do some wonderful things, but you have made a profound impact on the lives of many in the Latino community that really have made a big difference. And so again, congratulations. So we have a little short video we want to share with you. And in this video, it's about the 10th anniversary of ALAS. And so Carmella and I were going to kind of springboard from there and talk a little bit about founding of ALAS. I see my carnal there, Jose Leyba, certainly we'll invite you to chime in as well, because you were there at the front end as well. So maybe we can launch that video and then we can visit from there.
According to the 2010 U.S. Census, there are 50.5 million people of Latino descent living in the United States. By 2020, 1 in 5 school children will be of Latino origin. Despite these changing demographics in our schools, district leadership demographics have not altered in the last decade. Of the more than 14,000 school districts in the United States, approximately 250 are led by Latino superintendents. It's time that school leadership reflected the student population. Latino superintendents bring great advantages to our schools. They bring a cultural awareness of that growing student segment, as well as an understanding of socioeconomic issues and the challenge of language barriers. Additionally, it's important for Latino students to have role models who have had similar experiences. This need led to the creation of ALAS, the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, a membership organization focused on meeting the needs of present and future Latino leaders. It started in 2001 in New Orleans, where a group of Latino superintendents and administrators met to discuss the organizational structure, philosophy, and goals of forming a national organization.
And we started putting kind of the framework together.
The organizing members received support from the California Association of Latino Superintendents and Administrators, the American Association of School Administrators, and the Association of California School Administrators. ALAS was formally established in the summer of 2003 in Albuquerque as an affiliate of the American Association of School Administrators. The organizing members intentionally chose the acronym ALAS, the Spanish word for wings, as a symbol that represented the association's vision of soaring to new heights while moving forward. Members of the board were elected from 8 geographical regions of the United States and Puerto Rico. They elected the first president of ALAS, Stan Paz. With 100 members, a vision, and a name, ALAS began its mission to provide leadership at the national level that assures every school in America effectively serves the educational needs of all students with an emphasis on Latino youth.
We know that we have leaders who care deeply about children and want to do the best for them. So working and partnering with them and helping them understand what our families bring as assets, that it can only make their school districts better.
ALAS put this mission into practice by offering their members pertinent professional development, quality communications, and unlimited opportunities for peer support and networking. February 19, 2004, ALAS held its first Board of Directors and membership meeting at the AASA conference held in San Francisco. After their first meeting, membership and national influence began to soar.
Now, organization is very robust. There's a greater focus now on policy, on instructional practices.
This is not an organization by Latinos for Latinos, but is inclusive to all that are concerned with the welfare of children in America, the welfare of public education, and ultimately the welfare of democracy in our country.
In 2011, ALAS opened the Superintendent's Leadership Academy, the first leadership program of its kind.
The intent of the SLAs, the Superintendent's Leadership Academies, is to promulgate and to put out there the best candidates for leadership positions in the United States.
And that has been a very important move by the organization.
This program is essential. Statistics show that Latino students continue to lag behind their white counterparts in literacy, graduation, and college preparedness rates, and yet Hispanics are expected to make up 25% of the total U.S. population by 2050. After 2 years, the SLA is already showing results. There are 9 SLA participants that hold superintendent positions throughout the nation, and many others have been promoted to leadership positions. Continuing to soar in 2013, ALAS opened an office in Washington, D.C. and now has more than 4,000 members.
We're inviting everybody to come help, be thinkers with us, be innovators, to come and give us ideas. We're only going to be as strong as we all work together.
Welcome to our 10th anniversary. Welcome to the ALAS Familia.
The Latino population is increasing, and it is imperative that they be educated. ALAS is working to ensure that the most qualified leaders are in place to teach our students and will continue to do so for decades to come.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Carmella Franco, and I would like to acknowledge our Executive Director of ALAS, Dr. Maria Armstrong also. It was great to have her with us earlier. She's a wonderful support, as was noted by Patricia. First, I'd also like to congratulate Patricia Trejo, Angel Gomez, and their team who've overseen the plans for this wonderful conference. And it's an honor to be here with you. And congratulations, Florida ALAS, and the achievement of holding your 9th conference. You're preparing to enter your 10th year as an ALAS affiliate. This is a wow moment. Again, congrats. So you've just watched a video that chronicles those first 10 years of ALAS. We're now in the 2nd decade, soon to finish it, and we'll celebrate the 20th anniversary of ALAS in 2023. That's only 2 years away, and that is so exciting for us to think about. My colleague, Dr. Montenegro, and I were asked to share our recollections about the beginning of ALAS and that question of where were you when ALAS began? Well, I remember it vividly as though it were just yesterday. This is a walk down memory lane. So I was serving as the president of the California Association of Latino Superintendents and Administrators, CALSA, and had heard Superintendent Carlos Garcia, you saw him on the video, speak at a CALSA dinner about how the time had come for us to take on a national presence to represent Latino administrators and superintendents and all the Latino students across America. CALSA was the role model for this occurring as that organization was enjoying a great deal of success. So I received an invitation as CALSA president to attend a meeting where Latino superintendents and other leaders from a variety of educational walks and from a variety of states were present. New Mexico, Nevada, Michigan, Texas, Arizona, we were all there. So we held that inaugural meeting in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Governor Bill Richardson dropped by to wish us well. The idea of going national was no longer a dream or a possibility. It was going to happen. The electricity of excitement in the room was unbelievable. As you saw in the video, Stan Paz of Tucson, Arizona took on the helm as the first president. Bylaws were written, the name of ALAS was agreed upon, and the organization had wings. There was no turning back. It was a heady time, and the first 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. I was on the first board with wonderful colleagues like Hector and served 6 years. I wouldn't miss a national conference for the world. I attended all 17, having presented annually, and currently I'm involved with Hector as co-academic administrator of the SLA. I still am awed and honored to be a founding member of ALAS. We have a great past, as you saw. We have currently so many great things going on. The completion, the mini graduation, the formal one is to come in October, of cohort 10, of which Patricia and Angel are now graduates almost. The expansion of the SLA signature program, a principal academy, affiliates from 1 to half of the 50 states that started with CALSA. There are almost 25 now, and including the great Florida ALAS. So I thank you, Florida ALAS, for inviting Hector and I to be here. Good luck, and now I'll turn it over to Hector.
Great, Carmella, great job. And I'm going to tell you, it's just been an absolute pleasure working with Carmella and the future, preparing the future superintendents and cohort 10. But like Carmella said, you know, it's going back in memory lane. I'm originally from Los Angeles, but ended up in Texas. And in 2003, I was the superintendent of Isleta in El Paso. And I got the call from Stan Paz saying, hey, there's some of us getting together throughout the country that want to talk about a national organization. And so I was up on the front end meeting with them, with Stan Paz, Diana Lamb, Wilfredo Lavoy, Ricardo Medina, Carmella, Carlos Garcia. And these were some very great leaders. Carlos, he had been superintendent there in San Francisco and also in Clark County, Nevada. Stan Paz there in El Paso. And I know that Diana Lamb had also served as superintendent, Wilfredo Lavoy there in Lawrence, and Ricardo Medina. All superintendents came together and said that we really do need to look at creating a larger pool of leadership that understand the needs of the Latino community, that really are dedicated and committed to making a big difference in education. And so as we began to plan, our first conference was there in Chicago, and that was during 2003. And it was kind of a ragtime, just mom and pop thing. It was all familia. Everybody just really pulled together for each other. We had that first conference, and I think it was in a museum. And that was all that we can afford. We had to pull out our credit cards. We didn't have an executive director, so it was all kind of mom and pop kind of business, but yet we were all dedicated and committed. But it really just opened up the country to a very strong network that has continued to serve future superintendents, and as we see them coming up. And one of the things that I think has happened is that as we saw the strength of ALAS beginning to develop, then those affiliates beginning to emerge, even though CALSA was one of the initial ones, organizations in California, that leadership template really began to spread across the country. And so we're in many states throughout the country. And now as Carmella and I, we look back that we've gone full circle from founding members to now working with the Superintendent's Leadership Academy. And we want to continue to promote the development of that kind of leadership so that our country is better served with the changing demographic. And it's not going to slow down at all. And we see what's happening now with the dynamics that's happening with the change of demographics. And there are areas throughout the country that really have not had diversity. And so we have the greatest need to have that leadership through both inner city, urban, suburban, and even rural areas. But I think that as we begin to collaborate at a greater level, we see a lot of interest in equity. We see a lot of interest in integration of teaching strategies into the classroom that are more inclusive, that have a lot to do with dual language and bilingual education, that it is okay to tell our story and tell it well so that it's valued and appreciated, not during the times that I'm in here visiting my mother, you know, and she's 97 here in Los Angeles. And I remember the stories that she used to tell us about when she was a child coming in from Mexico, from Guanajuato, and how the teachers used to scold them for speaking Spanish, how they would make fun of them when they eat their burritos there at the lunchroom, and how they would exclude them and not believe in them. But we do need the kind of educators, and that's what ALAS is all about, that really help the rest of the educational community believe in the potential and the capacity of all children. So as ALAS began to continue to evolve, we saw greater and greater leadership expanding. During our 8th year, our 2008, we began to see other superintendents start coming into the organization, that Andres Alonso from Baltimore, we saw Patricia Watkins. There were really a lot more distinguished and large city superintendents, Alberto Carvalho, there from Miami-Dade, Pedro Rivera was in Lancaster, and he became the state superintendent of Pennsylvania, which is just really important. And, you know, people like Lee Vargas continue to serve the Alas community as well. Michael Hinojosa from Dallas. We just have seen so many come, Maria Ott and also Darlene. That are Robles that are now working and developing new leadership there at USC. And so the list goes on. Thelma Melendez was Assistant Secretary of Education. And some great leadership. Valeria Silva was superintendent there in Minnesota. And so we are really happy to see that there is some great leadership that have come through the organization, and they continue to support the work of ALAS. And so I'd like to maybe just, I didn't mention Christina Kishimoto, who also served on the board, superintendent of Hawaii, have served as a superintendent also throughout, I think it was in Connecticut and also in Arizona. So I'd like to really kind of open it up to our good friend, Jose. Maybe Jose, you can share with us also a little bit about your perspective about the history of ALAS, and then we can maybe take a few questions. One of the things I didn't mention is that one of the things that we had the first 5 years of ALAS was that we did international trips. We went to Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Puerto Vallarta, Dominican Republic, and we always met with ministers of education. We had educational seminars, we visited schools. Those were really rich and rewarding experiences that we all had a chance to collaborate internationally. And that was a great, I think, a great time for us with ALAS. José.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias. Bienvenidos. Gracias a la Florida ALAS por organizar este gran evento. Muchas gracias. First of all, I'm just so honored to be here and humbled to be here with Dr. Montenegro and Dr. Franco. They are some of the leaders that help, with the other names that you heard, help start this organization, much like all of you in Florida ALAS and every ALAS chapter throughout the country. I'm proudly wearing our Arizona ALAS. We in California were probably the first two organizations in the country promoting Latino networking and developing the next generation of Latino leaders and Latinas. And so consequently, we will be having our 35th annual conference in June 10th and 11th. And we have a great lineup, starting with Ana Maria Chavez, NASBA director, and Dr. Christina Kishimoto, and of course, Richard Carranza will do a mariachi presentation. And so, as they mentioned, it used to be a mom and pop organization. I was actually had left the superintendency, and my wife became a superintendent. She was on the board, having served as the president of AZ ALAS. And so I was behind the scenes carrying the bags and everything, which is just fine for me. I have to give credit to ALAS early on, recognize the importance of having Latinas involved in the process and making sure that we promoted Latinas. So I have to give a shout out to Hector and the early leaders for making sure that we shared between our men and women the responsibilities for building this organization. And it's always been de parte del corazón. That's why we do it, right? For the kids. I see my friend Eddie Soto, a very long time leader, many others that Dr. Collado, I mean, those that have sort of been the pioneers. So now it's up to you to be the next generation of pioneers and take the organization to the next level and to take your organizations to the next level. The SLA was probably something born out of those international trips in Costa Rica or Puerto Rico or Mexico, quien sabe, over a few margaritas, and a special margarita to Margarita Pinkos. Saludos, comadre. Felicidades for her award and her retirement. And I think that was really what brought the ALAS together even more so. I spoke with Richard Medina and the first executive director, Dr. Agi Orsi, gave them the contacts to the Kellogg Foundation, and they and Dr. Thelma Melendez de Santana took it from there. And so you can see the quality of curriculum, the quality of academic instructors that have helped ALAS be the premier preparation program for Latino and Latina superintendents in the country. And that's a great shout out to everyone that's ever contributed to that. So from cohort 1 to cohort 10, outstanding leaders. Congratulations to the 3 individuals from cohort 10 that have achieved the superintendency. We just had 2 additional ones from cohort 8, Dr. Daisy Torres and Dr. Carla Loria, that also just became, so we've had 5 ALAS graduates, SLA graduates become superintendents this year. So we look for very, very many more. Muchísimas gracias. Un gran abrazo de parte de Arizona, and we hope to see you at our conference. It will be in person, okay? We guarantee that. Gracias.
Thank you, Jose. And I really have to give a shout out to also a SLA graduate and just one of our shining stars. It just really is taken off. He is a finalist in 2 school districts for a superintendent, Alex Marrero. Hey, Alex, a shout out to Alex. Really good to see you. Also on the ALAS board, really committed to giving back to the community. And that's one of the things that we advocate for, especially with the SLA and the scholarship recipients, that you give back to the community. And it's good to see that there are many people still keeping the fire burning. And that's just really impressive. So again, Alex, good job. Wish you much success and good luck on your interviews. Carmella?
Great. We're winding up. It wouldn't have made it without you, Jose, and talking about the 5 superintendents. That's just in the last couple of months. And as each SLA member, even from prior cohorts, becomes a superintendent, we want to celebrate that. So our SLA is doing what it said it was going to do, produce Latina leaders. And that's what we want to see, so that they represent the Latino students across America. So Hector, thank you for naming all those giants on whose shoulders we all stand. They've all played their part, and it always sticks in my mind what Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa said. I went to hear him speak to a group of 11th graders. And he told them, come back, give back. Come back, give back. And that's what we like to do. That's what everyone's doing. We should be recycled now, you know, but we have all the new ones coming forward that are going to add to and build the future legacy of ALAS.
Absolutely. And there's so many more, you know, Richard Carranza from, you know, Chancellor of New York City, others. But I think that's good enough for our history. Patricia, we'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible. Angel, take it over.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Montenegro, and thank you, Dr. Franco. It's been so great having you in this event with us today. Like I mentioned to each of you, it just validates you being here, validates our efforts here in Florida ALAS. We cannot thank you enough, and everybody else who's here. But you know, we have a special place in our heart for the 2 of you. We spent a lot of days together this past very difficult year. One thing that I've noticed, Dr. Montenegro, is always 10 to 2 in that clock behind you. You may want to get batteries on that thing. I'm just want to let you know that. As we move forward, it is my job to, and I'm happy to do so, to give everyone, with the help of my great friend, Dr. Nino Collado. Nino, you're there. I can see you, right? There you are.
I am.
The help of Dr. Collado, bring a little bit of a scope of the history of now Florida ALAS. So I'll continue a little bit, if you don't mind, Nino, and I'll get you in a second. I'll continue with the history of ALAS, right? So ALAS gets created, and you saw all the great founding fathers and mothers that created this great organization. By the way, I was happy not to be included in that group. I'm glad to be part of the future of ALAS. That means that everybody thinks I'm young, so that's awesome. So here's ALAS doing their thing, and I guess at some point the best thing that ever happened to ALAS happened to them 10 years into their journey. And of course, that's when Florida ALAS was born. And at that moment, Florida ALAS became part of the ALAS family. And going back to history, it was a time where a few of our local Hispanic leaders got together and noticed that that they had a lot of common goals in regards to mission and vision of what should be done, and efforts to, you know, put together in alignment efforts that would align to what's benefit for Hispanic learners, right? And you know, and all the kids who we serve. Always very inclusive, but always keeping an eye for those who look a lot like them. And in 2012, in June of 2012, a nonprofit organization came about, and at that time it was called the South Florida Alas, and that's when he was born. We had the mission was established, and I'll read it verbatim so you know. It is complete alignment with ALAS. The mission of ALAS, the Florida ALAS, to provide leadership as the national and state. So not we, because I wasn't there at the time, but we went ahead and followed complete alignment with national ALAS. And I'll pass it on to Nino so he can talk to us a little bit about those founding fathers and mothers of Florida ALAS, and the first group to be officers.
Hey, Angelito, such a pleasure to be here. Well, here's the thing. We knew that the Latino population was growing a lot, particularly in Broward County, and we just wanted inclusion. So we got together with some of our brothers and sisters from BAPSI, which is the Broward Association of Black Administrators, and reached out to our brothers, our primos from Colorado ALAS, who came down to South Florida and brought us the statute and the way and approach. But here's the interesting thing. We wanted to form an organization, not necessarily motivated for political bantering and any of that. We wanted to contribute and push for equity. So the idea was, how was the superintendent at Bob Ronci at that time receive such an organization? Well, when idea went to him, not only did he embrace it both arms, but he came to push us to rely on Florida ALAS to get the community involved. And with that type of green light, we just went all out and began initiatives such as Mi Gente, Mi Escuela, which was an initiative reaching out to the community and hearing their voices, hearing their thoughts, inviting them to get involved. We also had our first members go through the SLA Academy right away. They jumped right on board, and we have a few graduates. In fact, 2 of them are graduating this year with cohort 10. The other thing we wanted to do, motivated by the reaction that the community did, was we wanted to have our parents, Angel, erase the line of success from 12th grade and put it back 2 years or 4 years. So we created an initiative called La Universidad Si Se Puede. La Universidad Si Se Puede, in partnership with, I remember the first one was MacArthur High School, yeah. And Santana did such a great job that, my God, hundreds and hundreds of parents went with really poignant questions, key questions. And then we did a few more. We partnered with Florida Atlantic, gave scholarships, and that became a big piece. But in 2015, the second administration took over with Michael, with Christine Desayas, with myself, and with Jackie Arnaz. And Mike Ramirez's vision was, let's erase South and let's just go Florida and let's just go out there and meet some primos. If you know, if you're Latino, once you pass a certain amount of time, like 3 years, you sort of become familia, you become primos.
For
so
sure.
We went out, the first primos that we met were the folks from Palm Beach. And we went, and man, did we hit it off. It was Patricia, it was Enrique, it was Oscar, it was awesome. Then we went out to Orlando and we met the wonderful Belinda and the rest of the team. I think Enrique at that time was in Orlando.
Yes.
And then we went to Hillsborough County, and suddenly we were Florida ALAS. You know, and now we're getting ready to go into our 10th year. But here's another thing that I'm really proud of the team that Mike and you have led, is that the minute we became an organization, we paid it forward. We were the first organization in the East Coast. We paid it forward to New York. We paid it forward to Georgia. We paid it forward to Chicago. And we paid it forward to other organizations that were coming up. And we just couldn't say enough things of this Latino organization. And I remember, because the number of administrators of Latino descent is so few, that when I went to the conference and I'm looking at Jose and Hector and Ms. Franco, and I'm like, all these superintendents, I'm like, oh my God, where have we been? So it has been an empowering feeling to bring this out and seeing people come up the ranks. So, Angel, we have a little surprise for our guests. And
Yes.
You want to set it up a little bit?
Are we talking now about the?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, so I don't know if we spoke about the end there. I think you already took us through the part where we turned into a complete Florida Alas, and we were able to go from a board that was completely Broward driven to now a board that actually has representation from Broward, Osceola County, Palm Beach County, very mixed. And for us, that was very important, okay? So now we have a little bit of a video that we're gonna show. Am I right, Nino?
Yeah, so I got to do this. I apologize. The music is Fania All-Star, Mongo Santa Maria, one of the key percussionists of the Fania All-Star. I know if you're New York, you got to be smiling. So the music is something called sofrito. And sofrito is every Latin mother's specialty. So the bottom line music is sofrito. And
The
here's
essence,
the
the essence.
essence, exactly. So here's the history of Florida Alas in pictures.
And there you have it.
Yeah, looks easy, but we made
Put together by producer Washington, Dr. Washington Collado and DJ Washington Collado, which was great. What a great history right there in pictures, Nina, of Florida Alice. So, some great moments throughout those pictures. Thank you so much.
But the thing, Angel, is I think back and I'm looking at these guys on the screen that I admire as an administrators, Latino leaders across the nation, is that we became friends, bro. We became friends. So, Mr. President, I hear you have an announcement to make.
Yes, I do. I believe that at this time is when we actually bring in and like that last slide show where you pass the baton to the next person, right? To the relay. So our elections have taken place in the state of Florida for Florida Alice. And we do have an incoming president. So today we're going to go ahead and recognize that president and pass on the charge and start her right now. So that's Patricia Trejo. Patricia.
Mira, la música, it was so good. I saw a lot of people dancing. Tenemos que salir a bailar. That's missing, right? That's a missing piece for us. So, mira, I'm honored and I'm ready to serve. I think it's important that we continue to increase the diversity among our teachers, specifically our Hispanic Latino representation. It's absolutely important because we know that it will definitely strengthen the academic outcomes of our little ones. So, of course, I'm not going to be able to do that alone. I have an incredible team already that's I'm excited to do this with. Dr. Ordenes Feliciano and Dr. Enrique Vela, if you both want to chime in and say something as well.
The other Patricia, we're going to have two Patricias in charge on the board. The other Patricia.
Just get ready, right?
There you are.
All right. Well, it is an incredible honor for me to be part of this executive board. I know I was very fortunate to be part of the SLA cohort 9. Thank you, Dr. Leyba. It was an incredible experience. And I do feel that it was just an empowerment moment for me. And I definitely encourage everybody else to go through it because it's just the learning experience and knowing that there are other successful Latinos in the whole country that are doing incredible things. It's just so empowering and so inspiring for us. So I'm looking forward to serving Florida Alice and of course continue my work and working together with our president. So congratulations to our president again.
Congratulations to all of you. And I know Enrique Vela is somewhere in here. Enrique continues his work, right? Enrique, where are you?
Well, of course, with my luck, at the most inopportune time, my camera stopped working, but it's a pleasure and honor to keep working as part of the board. I loved, the video was very nostalgic, both of them, on a lot of levels. And I remember when I first became a member, I was up in Orlando, and the climate was very different, and I literally would drive all the way down to South Florida just to connect with administrators like me. And, fortunately now up there, 2 Hispanic deputy superintendents and a first ever school board member that's Latina, who's part of our conference tonight. That climate is certainly different there now. And so as I continue to drive throughout the state, I want to make sure, starting from Miami, going all the way up 95, and when we get to Central Florida, cutting across I-4 all the way to Tampa and Hillsborough County, that no matter where I look, we'll be surrounded by primos, and I'm just committed to keep working with the board to make sure that we can do that.
That is correct. And as the outgoing president, I know there are other board members here too that are, 2 of you are staying on the board. I just feel very excited that I know that Florida Ala stays in good hands as we move forward with everything that we do. And I'll join at this time, I'll join Enrique Vela by having my Bitmoji, because both you and I look better on Bitmoji than we do in person, Enrique. So this is fine. I join you as I put my Bitmoji up and pass it on to our new president as we continue this great conference, Patricia Trejo. Yay!
No, gracias a todos. I think we are ready to get into the next piece here. I know Dr. Washington Collado has worked incredibly hard with everything that, I don't know how he does it. I mean, he's even wow, he's an author. I don't know if you all knew that, but he is an author, and he co-authored a book called Beyond Conversations About the Race. So we're going to hear a little bit about him along with Dr. Alex Marrero. We're honored to have him here as well with us. They're going to talk a little bit about the push for equity. So Dr. Washington Collado.
Thank you. Thank you. And congratulations, Patricia. Looking forward to serving with you on behalf of continuing the work. Dr. Marrero, so good to see you, brother. You got to unmute.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share this stage with you, sir.
Hey, man, I've known you for a long time. Dr. Marrero leads with a vision of support. The students, he believes students could achieve the maximum capacity. He has been honored as an outstanding administrator by the Latino Caucus of the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators, and inducted into New York Academy of Public Education. He received Leadership and Excellence in Education Award from the Association of Dominican Administrators. And of course, he is the interim superintendent of New Rochelle. In January 2020, Alex, as we all know him, joined the City School District of New Rochelle as the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. And in September, they had the good sense of making him interim superintendent. So, Alex, un abrazo, hermano.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Collado. And I know everybody knows, but I'm going to embarrass you a bit before I get into that. Thank you, Florida Alas. Florida Alas, I'm a New Yorker. I think everybody knows that, or at least you can tell by the way I'm speaking and how I'm going to gesticulate. And Florida is the 6th borough, folks. Don't pretend as if you're not part of New York, right? Florida is the 6th borough. So
you could be part of us. We are bigger than you.
All right, enough. We'll get into the debate in a moment. So Dr. Washington Collado was born in the Dominican Republic in a small town called Jánico. Who's been there? I've been there, Dr. Collado. Raised around educators, his mother, Maria, 7 uncles and aunts were teachers. He's been around this work. That's why, Patricia, he has the time, because the time is, in essence, what he does. It's what he lives. A New Yorker, I want to note that, a New Yorker, in the sense that he graduated from Franklin Lane High School in Brooklyn, New York. Lifelong learner, he obtained several degrees, a doctorate from Florida Atlantic educational specialist from Florida International, Masters of Educational Leadership from Florida Atlantic, and the ones I really like, the Master's and Bachelor's degrees from Queens College in the CUNY system, which is the City University of New York. He began his career in 1986, where he taught Spanish and English in the Department of Education, the largest school district in the nation. He served 15 years and is the current president of the Broward Principals and Assistant Principals Organization. And this past year, February, he was honored as the Principal of the Year for Broward County Public Schools, the nation's 6th largest school district. So accolades after accolades. And throughout his career, he's devoted much time, as you heard Patricia mention, for incredible piece of literature, Padres No Olviden Su Tarea in 2004, the English version, Parents Don't Forget Your Homework in 2009, Liderazgo y Escuelas Efectivas in 2014, and this past year, Beyond Conversations About Race, the major shift in the work. Thank you, Dr. Collado, and if it's okay, I can call you Nino. We're amongst friends, Primo, right? Okay. All right, Nino, can you take us through a historical perspective of Latinos in the United States?
This is 1783. This is continuing as we became a country and we acquired territory. Now we are acquiring a culture, a language, tradition, religion, music, food, architecture. We are acquired the so-called French Quarter in Louisiana was actually built, a lot of it by Spain. So these architectural pieces, along with some of the most important cities, were founded by Latinos. Can you think of Miami without the flavor, the flair of Latinos and Haitians and the multicultural diversity that we've created? New York City, where I was, I did my teenage years in Brooklyn and Queens, and what that means to us as a country. The Latino community, as a GDP, we are $2.13 trillion to the U.S. economy. And of course, our students have one of the highest dropout rates. So you can make a case, dropout or push outs, but take your pick of words. And that's why it's important. And then of course, you have our leaders who have taken on and represented every aspect of American culture that we hold dear. So the idea that we are a foreign culture cannot be further from the truth. So but here's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna end this like, change will not come, says President Obama, if we wait for some other time, some other person to enact those change. We are the change we seek. We are the people, we are the change we've been waiting for. So Alex, let me put you on the spot a little bit. Are we a race or a culture?
All right, well, as I process that, let me just, if I can, go into a little bit of an exploration. I think the history of Latinos and or Hispanics in the United States is often misunderstood. It's undervalued, as you mentioned, relegated to selective topics that really misrepresent the veritable and encompassing historical presence of us Latinos in the United States and the consequential contributions in the wide array of sectors in this American life. Of course, educationally, why we're gathered, socially, economically, and culturally. So that question, I know that we've struggled with. If we can raise our hands, it's the census dilemma. Are we a culture or are we a race? And here's my interpretation. I'm gonna answer your question, then I'm gonna go elsewhere with it, Nino. Hispanic identity really refers to language. So people of Spanish-speaking origins, Hispanic. Latino identity, however, refers to those with origins that are geographically in Latin America, Latino America. And while the two categories overlap, like people in Brazil and Spain illustrate the distinction. Brazilians are Latino because their country is located in Latin America, but Brazilians aren't Hispanic or aren't considered Hispanic because their country, the primary language is Portuguese. Meanwhile, Latino, Latina, Latinx identity brings together people in South and Central America who may share a history of Spanish colonialization and a category that isn't really defined by having a Spanish-speaking ancestry. So that's a little bit of background to your question if you put me on the spot like that. However, the question has implications, Nino. So if I can go, the question is often asked and centered around cultural identity within the Latino communities. You grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in the Bronx. A lot of my primos and friends grew up in Washington Heights. That Latino very distinct upbringing than a Mexican brought up in East LA or a Mexican American Chicano in Barrio Logan in Santo Domingo. Simply put, we're not monoliths, right? We're unique within our own cultures, cuisines, customs, but share many key attributes and characteristics. One, which is unfortunately the disparity in success rates as we saw initially, even in the Florida ALAS presentation, when we compared our Latino success rates or achievements compared to others. So I believe in the triadic. So the triadic in terms of taking Latino engagement to involvement to empowerment. So I'm going to repeat that, the triadic, three-step, three-prong, from engagement to involvement to empowerment. I believe community and parents, our Latino parents, are to be agents in education. As a system, we should not desire parental engagement. Instead, we should expect parental empowerment. That means that we have to relinquish some of our power, folks, right? Or the folks who have the power need to give it up. Early in my career, as a student, as a young scholar, and now as an educator, I really never saw parental involvement manifest into true agency and advocacy. So much so I devoted my initial research when I was a doctoral student to the phenomenon. I discovered that system leaders need to work closely with parent communities to support the learning of all children, especially in regard to the work that students do at home and an effort for students to put into school-related tasks and the motivation for the students to learn what's being taught. So those were my discoveries. But the true discovery is, what are real partnerships? What are real partnerships? Real partnerships, I believe, are to be symbiotic, meaning what is the benefit for the student, of course? What is the benefit for the parent, for the organization? As educators, we need to give the concept of real partnerships more critical attention if we really want our work to be authentic and if we want to create true family school partnerships that support students academically and socially. So that's my theory based on research that I conducted. So Nino, I took a little dive into Latino families' engagement in schools through education. Families see the possibilities of realizing dreams through accomplishments of children. However, the approach to engagement is limited due to a number of factors that impede or restrict the engagement. Now that can be fear, limited language, marginalization. So it's incumbent for us as leaders to seek and cultivate engagement. So the question I have for you, young man, is, are Latinos relegated, or are they meaningfully included in important dialogues in our country? So answer that in the scope of your school, but also across the nation.
So, powerful question. The way I see it with skepticism, whether we are gainfully involved in the dialogue. And here's why. If you see Sunday talk shows that drive the news, you will see very few Latinos opining. And when you see them opining on very selected topics, namely the main one that is immigration. But then you see some of our Latino brothers and sisters referred to as aliens, foreign, you're not from here. And when you ask an opinion, is if you don't like the conditions, if you criticize the government, then go back to your country type of thing. So we have to do more. But here's what I think, Alex. I do think that good leadership in schools matter. And when I try to make the point that we are not a foreign culture, that indeed we've been here, part of the fabric of America, building that our kids are serving in the military, they're your neighbors, they're in your school, they're your kid's best friend. That is an empowering factor, because this converges in all these communities converge in a school. And a principle that looks to create and lessen the prejudices of the world has cultural empowerment, where I could see myself welcomed into the school. I could see myself represented. Look at the world history curriculum. We are known as Latino Americans or Latinx or what have you. How much of the world history curriculum is dedicated to studying that describer of you as a person, the Latino culture in the Americas? Or if we go and say that someone is to be describing himself as African American, how much depth do we give Africa in sub-Saharan Africa and the great civilizations. To qualify that, describe it, that we are affixing to you description. So when we strengthen our kids culturally and we cross-curricularly enhance what we are teaching our kids, we strengthen. So they become part of the dialogue. As a principal, actually, do you know where your kids go at 3 o'clock? Do they go into communities and silo into the silence to then converge on campus again? Or are we, or do we know the civic organizations? Do they know the value of what brings happiness to culturally to these kids? The food, the music, the history, the literature. So let me ask you a question, Alex. How does that look like? What does that look like from the superintendent's seat? What is the push for equity, the push for inclusion? Because there's a difference between dropping out and being pushed out because I screwed up disciplinarily, or because you know school is just not for you, so you know take some. What does that look like? The push, the fight, the good fight, like Hector was saying, from the superintendent's seat.
Wow. So I believe superintendents are uniquely equipped to empower, to educate, integrate, and really look beyond the present conditions into the horizon of possibilities. So I think that we do have that as part of our execution. The question, however, is really how can a district leader make a true difference to change the perspective and possibilities? And I like to answer that by telling a story on how some make claims that they want to change, but are really unwilling to relinquish control. I'm gonna tell you a real story. I only know how to be real, as you know, Nino. And this is an actual story in which the token Latino makes his way, and that's me, all the way without trying, just picked up out of the air to be a finalist in a district in New York. This was years ago, right? So don't try to guess which one it is. And where they had 55, almost 60% Latinos, migrant families and corresponding students, of course, and they needed to do something about it. And there I was there at the dinner. My wife is sitting across and they're really just scoping us out to see if this is going to be the fix, the fix. And I remember the question that was asked, and they said they prefaced it so proudly saying, well, we have 55% Latinos, and before they wouldn't even respond to an inquiry. Now they're coming in. I said, what do you mean they're coming in? So we had a parent-teacher conference and we had an assembly, and some of them were sitting there and they pointed like towards the end, you know? And I'm like, all right, so explain to me, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, we saw a family come in with I guess their relatives, and they sat in the back of the auditorium. Mm-hmm. So then I go, okay, so I guess, can I answer that question, the question that they pose in terms of how can we empower more parents? And it also answers your question, Nino. And it possibly cost me the job, right? Because I told them how it was, right? I said, if we're celebrating because a family of Latinos walked into the auditorium of your flagship school and sat in the back, culturally, you're missing the point in terms of what that means to them. But that is not involvement. That is not engagement. That is just opening the doors. It definitely is not empowerment. That is so far off the scale of where we need to be and where you need to be. And they asked the questions, where do we need to be, Dr. Marrero? And I looked around at a group of 9 lovely folks, all who are white, 8 white men, 1 white female, saying until we have a representation here at the dinner table, at the dais, that's when you have empowered the majority of your population, because you haven't relinquished a thing. If anything, it's incredibly insulting that we're celebrating the fact that a family walked in and sat in the back row. So that's my way of really answering the question based on honest, I guess, my own interpretation of what I experienced. And what does it look like at the soup level, Nino? I'm gonna say it's critique around rigor, not about access. It's deep exploration about topics instead of asking if the curriculum is culturally appropriate for the learners. It's less about, does it connect with the lived experience of students? It's more about a reflection of the results. And as we saw in New York City, it's not about the entry exams. It's about parents and community being part of the fabric of decision-making, not simply a checkbox to say, yeah, I did it. I spoke to them. They signed right here. And it's all members of the community pushing each other and challenging ourselves, all of us. There is an incredible responsibility in the principal's seat, I know I've been there, and you as the principal of the year in the 6th largest district, and also author of several books, but more specifically and recently, Beyond Conversations of Race. I'm going to ask you to paint a picture of what a highly functioning school looks like in this day and age.
First of all, thank you, Alex. It's always learn from you. So let me tell you a story in Broward County. When COVID hit and our kids stayed home, the question from the school level as well as the district level was, what do we do? And we moved technologically. We had online textbooks, we had online support, we had online. And we didn't realize that a lot of the more, the poorer members of our society hadn't been keeping up. To the credit of our superintendent in our district, says, get the computers out of the school, put them in kids' hands. We gave out over 100,000 computers, put them in kids' hands so that they could gainfully become engaged in the school. So that made the schools better. Schools looks to welcome the parents. Now, if I'm engaging, I scope out the community, and I know my churches. The shyest parent that sits in the back is a leader in church. So I need that parent to encourage, to feel welcome in school, to be part of the PTSA. I need my office staff to understand the community they serve. I need my teachers to celebrate the culture of the community that we serve, to do an authentic celebration of Black History Month, of Native American History Month, of Latino Heritage, Hispanic Heritage Month. I need my school to look the part. I need my bulletin boards to show little girls being doctors, being lawyers, being engineers. I need my school to scream out, you belong here. You're not a foreign here. You're not an alien here. You belong here. And I am going to look right past that line of present socioeconomic conditions into the future that you have in this country that we putting together. And that's what it looks like from the principal seat, Brother Alex.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Nino. So you mentioned all those professions. Also, I want to see my young scholars become you, become me, become Leyba, become Carranza, become Soto, become all of us who are educators, because we know how difficult it is to sell the profession because of all the demands on educators, especially when I hear that it's still a white male dominated executive position in the nation. Only 1.7 superintendents are categorized as Latino across the nation, 1.7. And what we saw earlier, 25% of the entire student population is expected. That was a 10-year ago presentation by ALAS. It's expected to be even more so in 2025 by now. So we're going to have more than a quarter of our students, but yet we have less than 2%. And I know in Florida, it's no different, because when I did a study a couple of years ago, it was you, Dr. Reyes, who highlighted the fact that it's the same, if not worse, in Florida, in terms of the percentage of superintendents who identify as Latinx, the fastest growing segment of US.
Alex, it's been a pleasure sharing this platform with you. Looking forward to calling you Mr. Superintendent in the next few months. And certainly a friend of Florida Alice and a friend of Alice altogether. And we thank Alice for taking us in and giving us such high role models to aspire to. So Madam President, on behalf of Dr. Alex Marrero and Nino Collado, thank you so much for allowing us to have this friendly dialogue.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you both. First of all, I have to give a shout out to Dr. Leyba and SLA 6. I cannot go without saying that. Some interesting topics that both of you brought in and really hit home for us. Wow, what a question. What a loaded question. Latinos, is that a race or a culture? I think that begs for us to really think that one through. our own biases and to talk within our district. You know, Dr. Marrero talked about partnerships, symbiotic, benefit the students, the parents, the organization. How powerful is it to say it's not only taking or receiving or getting a hand, but also lifting others up with our actions and our work. And I think that assisting our community in seeing their value is as important as it is to assist them in their time of need. Leadership matters, and Dr. Collado said that. He said cultural empowerment and representation. There were a lot of tones of paying it forward. And I kind of jotted this down because this is what you brought into my heart, the both of you in your conversation. ALAS is not Hispanic for Hispanics. ALAS is about culturally responsive leadership. It's about leading for all by meeting the needs of each. It's about preparing the underserved and overlooked so that not only are they allowed in the back of the room, not only are they allowed to sit at the table, but they're given a voice and decision-making power at that table. And so we want to thank you so much for helping us be reflective about what we can do for our diverse students. And also to your point about foreigners or not, I'm often amused when people talk about, you know, how great it is to represent the minority population. I happen to work at a district where I attended as a child when I moved there from Puerto Rico. And I have to tell you, in a school district where 63% of the students are Hispanic, I really don't think I represent minorities. I think I represent the majority. So I think that we need to look at our population, our children, our parents, los abuelitos. We need to see in the power of us together, whether we consider ourselves Hispanic or Latinos, we are one family. And with that, I do want to segue right to Patricia.
Thank you, Belinda. I appreciate that insight as well. You know, we have the right person in the Zoom room, so it was critical that we make sure that we are highlighting those areas that we know that we need to address and ensure that we're continuing to bring to light. And so I'm delighted now that we have in our very own Zoom room an inspirational, incredible leader that has done so much. She is one of the 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States. I am just impressed with the amount of work that she has done in her history when it comes to affecting change here in the United States. She has litigated cases that have affected whether it was educational funding, disability rights, student disciplinary policies, or access to special services for English language learners, or even addressing issues that dealt with racially hostile environments. So I'm just pleased to have her here because not only is she going to take us into a journey of her personal journey with regard to being a former teacher, a former assistant secretary for civil rights, a former member of the Biden-Harris transition team, and now the first Latina elected chair of the United States Commission on Civil Rights. Help me welcome the first Latina elected chairwoman, Ms. Norma V. Cantú.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I missed yesterday, so I don't know if we thanked our Indigenous forebears. I didn't know growing up that what my family belonged to. I think many of us would say that. But I did have a clue because my grandmother would call the Thanksgiving turkey a guajolote, which is Nahuatl for pavo. And she would call the falda, the skirt that she would wear, Nahua, which is Nahuatl. Okay, so I kind of had a clue, at least from one of my relatives. My grandfather, on the other hand, the one who really looked Indio, did not know his tribe. He was orphaned very young in South Texas, and he was born before 1900 near South Padre Island. So hey, shout out to those of you who have students who have enjoyed Florida beaches and South Padre Island beaches as well. My grandfather talked about the indigenous people of South Padre Island that he had heard stories about, and those were the Tarahumara. And that I'm not sure what the tribe was famous for, but I asked, I'm reading in my Texas history book that there were some tribes that were cannibals. He said, not our tribe. And I said, why not? We only ate Spaniards. So I just want to share with you that he had a warped sense of humor, but his culture was one where he was inclusive of everyone. He wanted everyone to laugh at themselves and to laugh at a joke that has standed the test of time. I don't want to be as serious as I usually am because we have a lot of reasons to celebrate. And I'm telling folks, I'm one of your reasons to celebrate. Okay, I mean, I grew up in South Texas on a street that wasn't paved, less than 12 blocks from the Rio Grande River. And the kids across the street would get on the truck to go pick harvest. And I looked at my mom and I said, I'm not getting on the truck. And she said, no, you're not. And she lied. Because one day she put us in the back of the station wagon and she took us to pick cotton. Because we had primos who were living near Corpus and they had to bring in the cotton that year, and all the family had to come in and help. Okay, I am telling you, that is the worst take your daughter to work day ever. So I would not do that to any member of my family. But we had bags and we had regular adult bags. And I said, Mom, you told us that when you were little, that Appa made you a cotton bag that was child size. And she said, yes, he did. And then I thought, but wasn't that sad, Mom, that you had a child size bag? And she said, no, because we filled it faster. So if you come from a family where everything is a joke, where everything can be turned into something that shows optimism that tomorrow is going to be better than what yesterday was like, then you've got a head start. I mean, you've got strong families who the rest of the country doesn't acknowledge. I watched with very mixed feelings the family of George Floyd when they got the verdict, the guilty verdict. And my view on their talking about that, besides being emotional about it, was look at that family. Look at them praying every night. Look at them supporting each other. Look at them, how compassionate and how attentive they were to the needs of their family member, George Floyd. And look at them not asking for vengeance, not asking for revenge. Look at that family. That's an American family. And those are the folk that show an example for all people. I mean, we don't divide about race when it comes to family. We should be talking about the positives of the Latino family. And I'm going to be talking about that because my clients were Latino families. So let me shift the topic off of the things that are sad to the things that I mean, George Floyd makes me sad. So I apologize that I brought it up, but I can't avoid talking about it. What I celebrate is I'm not first generation college. I'm 1.5. Because my mother and I were in college together. During the civil rights movement in the 60s, my mother got this idea that I can do this. And she finished her first year of college and then another year of college and then another year, and did it very, very slowly. But you know, she had 6 kids to raise at home. So she did it very, very slowly. But she saw me moving really fast through school. So she says, I better take more than 1 class a semester or Norma's going to pass me. So we're in the same college yearbook together. I'm generation 1.5. And that gives me a reason to celebrate that she convinced my aunts, her sisters, to go back to college. And they were able to get really good jobs and were able to contribute to the families. That's a cause to celebrate. We have causes to celebrate that we have become visible in the area as our own distinct group, that we are not the other color that's not white. So the big case that came down was Hernandez versus Texas. There was an all-white jury, and Mr. Hernandez needed to see a jury of his peers, and he was told, there's whites on the jury. They went back, there had never been a person with a Spanish surname, and they, as far as records went back like 60 or 70 years. Zero people who were of Spanish descent have ever served on a jury. And so he went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the state of Texas argued, whites, you're white. So are we a race or are we a culture? The US Supreme Court ruled you are a discriminated against group. You're gonna dodge that question of whether you're a race. You are a group that has been discriminated against, and the discrimination covers education, employment, housing, and all of the opportunities that whites get in your state. So the Supreme Court sent him back to a trial. You want to know what's really cool about this lawsuit? There was a Latino filmmaker who decided to visit with both of the families. The family, Mr. Hernandez shot someone in a bar. So he talked to the shooter and he talked to the victim in the bar, and their descendants, not the actual folk, but their descendants. And both of them talked about the lawsuit as something that made Latinos visible, made Latinos or Hispanics, whatever we're calling them this decade, made them real, because they gave them the status of the Supreme Court saying, we know you, we see you, and we see what folk are doing to you. He was such a good filmmaker that when he had the premiere, he figured out how both families could show up at the premiere. Can you imagine your grandpa shot my grandpa? And he did a beautiful, beautiful red orange curtain, a velvet curtain between the aisles inside the theater. And he did, at the end of the film, he let the curtain open and revealed to the families each other, and they've applauded together that the filmmaker had done a wonderful job of remembering who we were, remembering how both their families had suffered, and celebrating the changes that those families had made. So we just need so much more of that type of ingenuity and that type of creativity of honoring what we have added, not to just our communities, but to all the communities that fight for their rights and fight for their protections. I celebrate that my high school doesn't look like it did when I was a high school teacher. When I was a high school teacher, I was 19 years old. They had no business hiring a 19-year-old, but the teacher shortage was so horrible, they hired a 19-year-old and put her in front of a classroom, and then they overcrowded the classroom with 30+ students. Then they overcrowded the building, and we had split shift. The seniors and juniors would go in the morning, leave at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's when my classes would start at 1. And I taught 6 classes in a row with no breaks. So teaching was something I loved, but it was kind of another take your daughter to work day kind of experience, because it was tough. When it rained outside, sometimes it rained inside. The air conditioning couldn't keep up with a building that had been stuffed with twice as many kids as it needed to hold. And the reason for that, I later learned, was because we had inequitable state funding. And the reason for that, I learned when I went to law school, because there was a Supreme Court case that said the US Supreme Court doesn't care if you have inequitable state funding. Now, there was a little tiny footnote that said, of course, if you get no school education at all, if you are completely excluded from public education, then we'll look at that case. But that's not this case. The Rodriguez case was about comparable levels of funding. And the Supreme Court says, we wipe our hands, we wash our hands of that. It's not written in the Supreme Court in the Constitution. There is no right in the Constitution to public education. Now think of all the rights that we have amended into the Constitution, and we've never put education in there. But the Rodriguez case is why I taught him in conditions that teachers shouldn't have to teach it, with overcrowded and sometimes dangerous classrooms. I had an opportunity after law school to work for the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund. And I loved it so much, I stayed there for 13.5 years. The Maldiv people had a backlog of cases for me, and they were school desegregation cases. And this is how the arc goes around. MALDIF was filing school desegregation cases because there had been U.S. Commission on Civil Rights hearings in Texas, and a lot of Latino community groups decided, well, the African Americans are winning these cases, so we're going to file some more. Well, you filed some back in the 40s. I mean, Mendez and someone said San Felipe del Rio, because that was one of the ones filed back in the 40s. So we started earlier than the NAACP did in filing deseg cases, but we caught up in the numbers because we had a backlog in MALDIF, and so MALDIF is sending out lawyers to desegregate. What schools did we work on? We worked on at first the donuts. So I call the donuts those school districts that are big, and then in one part there's a density, an overconcentration of just people of color. Or it's the other way around. It's a big school district, and then there's this one little density, this little island of white people. So those were the easy ones because it was easy to redraw maps and easy to convince the courts. One of my famous cases, guys, was Odessa, Hector County. Odessa is right next to Midland. You know where Midland is? Well, go to Dallas, Fort Worth, and keep going for about 10 hours, and you'll get to Midland. Odessa was sued by the Department of Justice in 1970, along with 7 other Texas school districts and the Texas Education Agency. The others went into court, had trials, and nobody went back to Odessa. So Odessa had just like kind of disappeared and, you know, like hidden behind a sandstorm or something. And Odessa had not caught anybody's attention for a couple of decades. But I inherited Odessa, and DOJ and I went back in again. And we found out you were twice as likely to have a teacher with more than 2 years experience if you lived on the white side of the railroad tracks. You were 10 times more likely to have a teacher with a master's degree or a doctoral degree if you were on the white side of the railroad tracks. The football team was the famous Hector County Mojo, Permian High School. These folk went to state championships every year, had a budget that was huge. The buildings on, and I'm talking about a case brought in the 80s. I mean, I'm not talking like an old case. I'm talking about a case where their defense for why they didn't put a school in a place that was mutually accessible by the Latinos and the non-Latinos was, honey, every time we drill and build in that part of town, we hit oil. Okay, we all should have that problem. All school administrators should have the problem that you strike oil every time you go out and dig a hole in the playground or in a property that the school owns. But the famous thing about that is we integrated the football team. And guess who learned about that? Well, some writer in New York City who wrote Friday Night Lights, who talked about an integrated high school team that was Black and white and Latino. And that was the result of a MALDIF case where we were able to integrate the students, the communities, and the extracurriculars. That was the hardest. But another famous MALDIF case was Edgewood versus Kirby. That's our school finance case. Okay, so let me tell you why I got dragged into Edgewood. Our co-counsel, Al Kaufman, doesn't take no for an answer. So when the Supreme Court said no in the Rodriguez case, he said there's got to be another way. And he went and talked to educational researchers, the same folk who train you all to be principals and train you to be superintendents. Well, they trained Al Kaufman how to sue the heck out of Texas. They trained him on what experts he needed and what data he needed to produce. And so Al convinced the rest of the organization, MALDIF, let's go sue Texas for inequitable school funding. So was it inequitable? Was it like a slight difference? It was a 20-to-1 difference. For every nickel that a school that was predominantly low property wealth, that same nickel of tax would raise $1 of tax in an Anglo or an affluent neighborhood. So 20-to-1 difference meant real, but we needed real evidence. We needed real proof that it mattered. Oh, by the way, every superintendent that was rich says money doesn't matter. You could teach under a tree. I mean, all the ancient Greek philosophers did that, but they wouldn't share any of their money. So we had to prove to them that money mattered. And here's some examples. These are examples that you all were raising that came up through the pandemic. Our classrooms were not big enough that if there were an emergency, you could put more people in and space people around. Remember the example I gave you of an overcrowded classroom and having to teach on double shifts. So we had building capacity issues back then, and we showed that that was predominantly in the low property tax places. Our ability to prepare people for college was hampered, again, because we didn't have the science labs, we didn't have the specialties. But you know what? We taught computer science in Latino schools, computers. Okay, figure how that was. Okay, we had it on the books that we taught computer science, but what the kids had was a piece of paper where a template was drawn on it to look like a keyboard, and they were asked, use your imagination. Imagine that you're pressing the run key, or imagine that you're pressing the enter key, and then imagine that your screen now says, and then they would read you what the screen would say if you had a screen. This was back in the 80s, and 40 years have gone by, and we're still in a digital divide. We're still having a whole lot of concerns about all of our students, not just our Latino students, but all of our students having the support that they need, not just to use computers, but to actually be creative and to make things with the computers. And then the last part of it is, darn if there wasn't that same New Yorker running around looking for something to write about, and he wrote about he wrote these people who work on the East Coast steal all our best book ideas. I tell folks, if you don't see a Latino book that tells you something that you're very interested in, write that book, because otherwise someone in the East Coast is going to steal that idea and write it for you. Well, they wrote a book called Savage Inequalities. You know, Coso, big a bestseller, and it was all about the Edgewood case that Latinos won. It took more than a decade. It took 6 trips to the Texas Supreme Court. It took a lot of school superintendents, a lot of school principals, and it took a lot of research data. One of the best testimonies that went in, and I think it's national, we lose a lot of our best teachers because they leave the profession. They don't leave your school to go to another school. They don't leave your district to go to another district. They just leave teaching altogether. And we put on data for the judge. It says there are 3 reasons that you're losing your best teachers. 1, they got a job offer. 2, they're looking for a job offer. And 3, they don't think their school administrator understands them. That they're not connecting with their school administrator. And you can imagine, think of someone teaching bilingual education who's working twice as hard as everyone else, who's preparing multiple differentiated lesson plans, and then is being visited, briefly by the principal and is being told, yeah, but you're not as popular as this other teacher, or you're not doing such and so, which is this other teacher does in her or his free time. So the not respecting and the not understanding and not being able to give people feedback and support was number 3 on the Texas list of why we were losing teachers. So with a wealthy state with great wealth throughout, the Supreme Court kept ruling against the Texas Education Agency, saying, fix the problem, fix the problem, fix the problem. Finally, the court dismissed it and said, this is as far as the courts can go. We can't think of any more reasons to say that you're unconstitutional. We think you're barely constitutional, but we're ready to let go of this case. And we thought it was going to be the end of fighting for equitable school funding. But you know what happened? Something so miraculous that makes me celebrate. A retired Supreme Court justice volunteered to chair a committee on a study on Texas public school finance. And he convinced both Republicans and Democrats together to say, just because you're released from the court doesn't mean you don't have any responsibility. And they put in a few more $1 billion into education based on his committee report. So I want you to think of that. I want you to think of the friends that you have out there that you didn't know were your friends. We have allies, we just haven't. It's like our tribes that we don't know the name of our tribe. We just don't know their names yet. And we will know their names.
Okay.
Because Plyler is the biggest reason to celebrate. The biggest reason to celebrate is because this is one where the families had nothing to lose. Remember, I told you there was an exception that said if you can't get into school at all, then maybe you could go back to the Supreme Court. Well, these were kids who could not go to school at all because they were being charged out-of-state tuition. And it was intentional. The state and the local district knew it, that they couldn't afford it, kept them out. Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that public education was being denied in a discriminatory manner. They didn't rule on the issues of immigration and the state enforcing immigration law unfairly. That they didn't get there. They just went back to equal protection if these children wanted school. And you know what the evidence was? The children came forward, testified in court. They were afraid they were going to get deported. They were afraid that the neighbors would come after them. I was there in Tyler when it was going on. There were swastikas painted everywhere. So they had reasons they to be afraid. But they won. And when they won, I got a phone call from the local council, and the local council said, Norma, I wish you were in Tyler today and you could see what they've done to my office. And for a second, I was scared and I thought somebody vandalized. He says, all the parents who make their living as agricultural workers, and by the way, the agricultural product of Tyler, Texas is long stem Tyler roses. They had filled his law office with long stem Tyler roses to show their gratitude and to celebrate that families can win and families can get forward if they're involved, and that families are their kids' own heroes. And so I wanted to give you homework. And I give everybody homework because I used to teach, 9th grade. So your homework is reach out to some family folk that you know. And instead of saying, I'm going to do this for you, I know how to write this letter, or I know how to make this presentation, or I know how to get this politician to do something, teach them how to, because they deserve to be their children's heroes.
All right, we're going to go ahead and start with the first one there. It says, Lágrimas de Amor, and we're so lucky for your journey and your continued fight. Thank you. As a Caucasian, how can I be a better ally? That's a great one. Chairwoman Cantú, what do you think?
Let me unmute first. Thank you for that, because I'm trying to be an ally of groups that I don't belong to, particularly the transgender community, because the hate crimes are so severe, and now of the Asian American community, because again, the hate crimes are so severe. You can be an ally by teaching yourself. The folk are so busy trying to conduct their fights that they don't have the luxury I have of being able to teach about it. I'm grateful to the University of Texas at Austin that it lets me work with my students on these issues of Latinos. But as an Anglo, you have to remember what Dr. Arturo Madrid said. He said, Latinos are connected to everyone. They're connected to us to every group and culture. They're connected to everyone in aspirations and hopes for this country. And he says, and in a few years, they're going to be connected to everyone because they're going to be your brother-in-law. So you are, by necessity, you are either now or soon will be connected to Latinos. So if you're looking for specific things, all of the Latino groups I'm aware of, LULAC, GI Forum, Aspira, Cuban American groups, Puerto Rican groups, they are inclusive. They don't have a line that says you have to show a card that says you're Latino. They want allies. So that's one way to do it. And you have research talent or you wouldn't be in this audience. And Latinos are always needing that evidence-based research that you all know how to do. Whether you're a quantitative person or a qualitative person, you can be of help. And we've won a lot of lawsuits because of our Anglo allies who have testified that they tried to vote at the same time and they saw that Latinos got treated differently in trying to register and to vote, or that the students tried to get access to certain information and they couldn't get it because of the barriers and the obstacles that were placed there in their path. So you are our friends and our allies, and I love you.
Well, they're definitely very grateful to have you here with us today. Do you think the current administration will deliver immigration reform?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Latino community is very organized in communicating how urgent this is. The frustration in the past has been that people try to splinter off the dreamers and say, we'll take care of just them. And everyone else, we're not interested in them. We don't even want to discuss it. And they don't realize that we have people who have been persecuted in their home countries, who have suffered tremendously by internal strife in those countries, and to only address legislation to the dreamers is wrong. I mean, it's I don't know why we haven't taken care of the dreamers, plus taken care of their parents, and plus taking care of people who are here because of terrible conditions in their home countries. The other way the business community can be hugely helpful is to help the Congress and the White House describe a plan for addressing the economic needs in other countries. We're on a spending spree here in the US, and somewhere in all that budget that we've been approving, there could be a small amount that we could use to address some very urgent needs in Central and South America and other countries.
Right there. How would you suggest school leaders begin to increase a safe environment for a growing community of students identifying as Latinx? Often school leaders and teachers alike have biases that impact student learning. How do you promote equity and inclusion among staff with biases?
So there's an internal self-examination that has to be very rigorous, where school districts need to look at what are the barriers and obstacles that their teachers and administrators have been posing. If you don't ask, you'll never know. So there's kind of like a don't ask policy, where they don't respond with as close an examination of complaints. In Texas, there were some school districts that didn't like bilingual ed, even though it was the state law, and so they kept telling school districts. The Texas Education Agency kept telling school districts, when a complaint comes in, don't send it to us. You really should send it to the feds, because they have more expertise. So they were avoiding changing the culture. So part of it is reporting things that are obviously a different standard or different treatment of Latino families and Latino communities. I'll give you an example. Our state of Texas loves standardized tests. Now, they're less in love with it now than they were before, but they loved it. They stopped giving standardized tests to the Latino students because they were told by a federal court, you need to teach them in the language they understand and can perform better in. And the twisted lawyer logic of it was, well, the judge said, if you're going to test them, you need to test them in a language. So we just won't test them. We'll just exempt them. So families that were Latinos got no feedback, no loop of information the way Anglo-English speaking families got. And that needed to have been reported a lot earlier and needed to have been sued a lot earlier. So there are some different treatments out there that are happening that can get reported out. Let me tell you that the training of administrators is vastly better to spot those issues of unfair treatment. And we still have a long way to go to be more integrated as far as the top administrators. You know, we still have that as a challenge ahead of us.
We certainly do, and we're out of time, and I'm saddened by that, because this was an incredible interactive discussion with you, and we're grateful that you took the time to come and be here with us. But we're going to go ahead and segue into the panel discussion with some active and former superintendents. We are so thrilled to have, we'll start off with Dr. Jose Leyba. We already know him. Hello, hello. Gracias por estar aquí. And the president-elect of NAPSI, Dr. LaTonya Goffney. Thank you for being here, Madam President-elect. And we have Zandra Galvan, superintendent. Also, thank you for being here. And a previous Dr. Roberto Avossa, superintendent of Palm Beach County. Thank you for being here. And we have the Chief of Strategy and Global Development for IXL Learning. And we have to make sure to thank IXL because they're the ones that are sponsoring this wonderful panel discussion with Dr. Richard Carranza.
Thank you, Patricia. It's an honor to be here. And I have to tell you, I'm starstruck by this panel, myself excluded, because these are people that I have looked up to, that I have followed in some cases their footsteps, but in all cases, the work that they have done, are doing, and will do to serve our children across this country. So I just want to say to Robert, to Zandra, to LaTonya, and to Jose, thank you for joining me on this little this panel to have a little conversation. There are no pre-planned questions. It's all about what you're doing now, what you've done, and hopefully that will illuminate. You know, when we go to conferences and then we sit in the let's just say the lounge, and we just talk. That's what we're going to do today. Okay, so let me set the context for us. As of today, there are over 3 million cases of COVID-19 in the United States of America. We have now suffered 52,000 deaths related to COVID-19, which is at the same rate as everyone we lost during the Vietnam War. If you look at Florida, there are 36,000 deaths as of today from COVID-19 in Florida. Obviously, over a year ago, all of us pivoted from in-person learning, what we all knew and did for years and decades and centuries, to a whole new environment. So I think what's really important to start with is I'd like for each of you, if you don't mind, to tell us what your experience has been pivoting your school systems or whatever school systems you work with to this whole new environment of working and learning and living in a COVID environment. So I'm going to ask Madam President, Dr. Goffney, would you start us? What's that look like in Aldine?
I'm laughing at that, Madam President, but thank you. And thank you, Patricia, for having me. And I am honored to be on the stage with all of these esteemed panelists. Of course, I am starstruck. I followed Dr. Carranza to the Houston area, and we have been connected since the beginning of COVID. Seriously, it was late March when ALAS had a panel, and we came together and began to discuss what we were being faced with, and nothing could have prepared us for it. No education, no textbook, no encyclopedias, if they still have those, nothing. But what I can tell you in Texas, we say in our district, we're gonna go as fast as we can, but as slow as we must. And we've said that we were gonna prioritize safety without sacrificing learning, and we feel like we've been able to do that. Now, we have been pushed. Literally, we had to begin school after the March spring break. We pivoted immediately and did the best that we could and stood up at home learning. And again, that's not a process that I would want to repeat, but I'm telling you, our staff worked fervently. They worked hard during the summer to really come up with quality learning, no matter if you were learning in class and learning at home. And so we were able to put protocols in place. We didn't have a choice. Like literally, in Aldine, if you looked up Harris County, the positivity rate in Aldine was the highest of any county in the state. And it was scary because you had to, again, balance safety as well as balance the fact that adults need to get paid and our students need to learn. And so Texas did a push. We began remotely 100% for 3 weeks. And then we began to transition groups of students whose parents would allow them to come and learn at school. And what I can tell you is we've been able to take and make lemonade out of lemons per se, because I didn't begin with the context of Aldine. I told you that our community was experiencing the highest positivity rate. And I know you guys are in Florida, so you probably understand the conservative traditional context of government, but just for the context of Houston, if you've ever flown into Bush Intercontinental Airport, you were in the middle of Aldine. And we have about 67,000 students. 73% of our students are Hispanic, 38% are English language learners, 23% are African Americans, And more importantly, just so you know how important learning opportunities are, is the fact that 9 out of 10 are on free and reduced lunch. And so it was tough because it was a matter of our families were experiencing some of the highest positivity rates, and then our families needed to be in school the worst. And it was a tangle, it was a struggle. But the things that I'm proud of, and I remember Dr. Carranza saying we didn't want to return to normal. Normal wasn't good enough for our kiddos. And then another thing that he said while we were talking is we didn't want COVID to become the new excuse for low expectations. Y'all know it would happen. 5-10 years from now, as our students are preparing to go to high school, they would look at those Black, those brown, and those students of poverty and say, hey, remember COVID? That's the reason why they're not able to meet the bar. But what we've tried to do is we were able to shift to 1-to-1. And so through collaborations with our community and the mayor, all of our students are 1-to-1, and we were able to create some really quality learning experiences for our students. And I'm really proud of how our teachers have been able to work. Now, our context is maybe similar to Florida, I'm not sure, but we were pushed into it. And so we had to bring as many back as we could. And we started with 44%. And then by the end of the year, we're up to 62%. And we're still one of the lowest face-to-face in the area. So I appreciate this opportunity, looking forward to the dialogue.
Thank you. And I know that, our sister on the West Coast, Zandra, has also been tackling these issues. So Zandra, what's that look like in California?
Thank you everyone so much for inviting me and being part of this. I love my familia from Florida and appreciate the opportunity to share our story. What Dr. Goffney is sharing, we experienced here on the West Coast as well. And some of the things that we learned quickly is how to embrace our familia, our parents, I will say our community, and understand their perspective. It was so critical for us to listen, to understand what was happening. And in my community, as similarly to many of our counterparts across the nation, had 5 families in one home. So we quickly understood when you say that you want a state test in California at home, that's not going to happen. We have familia on top of familia on top of familia trying to concentrate. And when a teacher says, I need you to find a quiet space for your child, there is no quiet space. We are Latinos. We do not have that in our household. And so quickly we had to understand perspective. And we also had to understand the stressors on our families. We had families that were enduring, financial difficulties. They were losing their jobs. I am from a farm working community, proud to be a product of my Greenfield schools as the superintendent. So I know exactly what it is like growing up in this town and seeing what our children and dealing with adversity. And so structurally, emotionally, parentally, where we have high school students getting our kindergartners and our preschoolers on their distance learning because mama and papa need to go work in the field. Because if they don't have a check. And if they don't have a check, they don't pay the bills, they don't eat. So talking, with all of those individuals gave us perspective, and especially seeing with the digital divide and having to quickly turn around. We were already 1-to-1 in terms of devices, but they weren't in the home. So we got to rewind 15 months ago. And it's like, oh my gosh, the things that we quickly had to resolve. And it was an all hands on deck approach. We need to get a device in every single kid's hand. We need to get a Wi-Fi spot. We need to park a school bus on every single corner, because if we don't, they're not going to learn. And so it is our ethical, moral responsibility for our Latinos, our children of color, to make sure. And in my community, we are 98% Latino, and we are also 98% socially, economically at a disadvantage, but we are 100% capable of post-secondary success. And so how did I get everyone together to make sure within 2 weeks we had those devices and those hotspots rolling and making sure that our kids were logging in and understanding? And we are familiar culture, right? Latinos we are. So we were in those, we were knock on the door and then run to the curb. Okay, we know it's COVID. So let's see. We need to know what is preventing you from getting on computer? So our family and community liaisons were quickly into households and figuring out, how do we connect you? Because we will not allow you to lose because of something that isn't our responsibility. So that's a little bit about the financial, the emotional, the stressors that we just had to quickly acknowledge from our perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think what LaTonya and Zandra have both highlighted is like when you're in the breach, there's no time to do a process for, fixing to. You got to do it now. And we hear that passion in your voices, but we're also very, very fortunate that we have two gentlemen that also work with superintendents across the country who have sat in that chair, but have also counseled superintendents across the country. So I'm going to ask Dr. Leyba, what your experience has been in terms of working with superintendents and others in school systems during this age of COVID. I think you're muted, sir.
You have two superintendents, Dr. Goffney and Dr. Galvan, that obviously don't look any worse for the wear and tear. So, because I know they look wonderful. They're still energetic. They're still in the chair. They're still out there advocating for parents. I see four areas. One is supporting through mentoring, through coaching, those individuals out in the field, all over the country, talking to individuals after those long 24/7 days. So I think that is one critical factor that I see that individuals like Dr. Avossa and myself are doing and will continue doing, because that's really important, not forgetting that we have to help those leaders in those times when you're going, oh man, how am I going to do this? I just had a teacher die, or COVID, or a family that all five of them had COVID and they're undocumented. How could, just listening and providing that support. I think that's one thing. Advocacy, being active out in our local legislature nationally to advocate for resources for our communities, especially seeing the inequities, especially in the health disparities for our communities. So that's been something else, helping superintendents when they can't speak out. Guess what? I can speak out because I'm not looking for a job, and I'll speak out at any level, whether it's a legislature, whether it's with a corporation, or whether it's at the Department of Education. So that's serving as a voice. The other thing is connectivity, connecting schools with those resources and those nonprofits that can help them be successful. And finally, that diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, and still moving the needle. This past year and a half, I've done 3 presidential searches, a vice chancellor search, and then also 1, 2, 3 superintendent searches, and getting the right leaders in there that have that equity lens, and they understand our community and have empathy for our community. And there are leaders that are changing the landscape for our community because they know what to focus in on. So those are the areas that I've seen myself be actively involved in a local and a national level. And so just giving those leaders support, and then helping some leaders transition out that are saying, Jose, ya me cansé, ya no puedo. I just, 40 years in the seat and I just can't do it anymore. And I'm telling them, hang on for 1 more year, do a succession plan, mentor one of your assistant superintendents, recruit from the SLA. We've got all these Superintendent's Leadership Academy candidates that are just ready to go out there and help. So I was really excited that in partnership with Dr. Franco and Dr. Montenegro have done a wonderful job. We had 5 SLA superintendents this year. And of course, another one in the pipeline, and another one, and that doesn't even take into account the principals that have moved into assistant superintendent roles, because they're ready now for the next step. So muchas gracias.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Leyba. Dr. Avossa, I know that you mentor and coach lots of superintendents across the country. What has the perspective been from your lens as you've done that work?
Well, I'll tell you from one of the individuals that I informally coached, Gabe Trujillo, superintendent at Tucson Unified, when this all started, he says, Jose, I can usually call all the old men and women retired superintendents. I said, oh, thanks a lot for the compliment. Whenever we've had issues or there's problems on how to work with the board, the community, the politics, he says, but there was no one to call in the pandemic because we'd never had anything like that. So really just listening and supporting their efforts. And all of you have done a wonderful job. We have some really competent people out in the field that know exactly what they're doing. And so it's really supporting them, doing the connectivity and really just listening, man, you know, un abrazo, you know, because I just take my hat off to the two of you there, because my goodness, we've never in education faced a situation like this.
You're right. Very, very well spoken. So Dr. Avossa, what, from your perspective, what are you hearing when you are mentoring and coaching superintendents across the country?
My first thought was I wanted to get my uniform on and go back. I felt awful that I couldn't contribute in a more meaningful way. However, I will tell you this, which was really interesting because I never had an opportunity to do this. It was amazing to see how regionally each of the districts and the states were handling the pandemic along the different phases of it. So the first district in the country to have a student officially diagnosed with COVID was one of my former area superintendents, Dr. Ian Saltzman in Everett, Washington. I'll never forget getting the call. I have the first student, what do I do? Now, I will tell you, I'm not short on words, but when someone asks you in the middle of a 100-year pandemic what to do, there's not a lot of good answers that come to mind. So what I did quickly was get a lot of other people on the call and collectively help the superintendent and the board make a decision about closure, and at least for 10 days to catch their breath and figure out what the heck was going on. Odessa, Texas handled it differently. I was in Norwalk, Connecticut, and of course in the Wild West in Florida it was easy. The governor gave no choices. It's like you're opening schools. So it obviously caused a lot of issues for teachers. They worked so hard to try to make the best of a bad situation. And I think we need to applaud them, and we need to help them maintain high levels of expectation. I continue to see that here, even in my own backyard, excuses being made for new immigrants, particularly our South American friends and Central American friends, Guatemala and Honduras and other places that are coming and wanting a better life, and yet we struggle. The last thing I'll tell you is this, and I think good superintendents are going to find a way to maintain the relationships they've built. A lot of your communities stepped up in big ways to get food out, to help, like all this stuff, foods, school supplies. Let's not lose that. Let's make sure those same groups feel valued and connected with us, so that we can use that energy on the academic side, not just the social side.
Well spoken. Thank you. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think this is the power of this panel, is that you see leaders that know how to lead. And that's really, really important. So next question. 9 minutes and 26 seconds. Just let that permeate for a minute. 9 minutes and 26 seconds. What are you talking about, Carranza? Well, we've all dealt with 3 pandemics over the last 14 months. The viral pandemic called COVID-19, the adjunct economic pandemic, which has devastated many of our families, and then what I call the 9.26 pandemic, which is the reckoning that this country is finally coming to around our racial justice and injustice, around race relations and how we treat all of our citizens. If you didn't pick up the 9 minutes, 26 seconds, that is actually how many minutes that police officer Chauvin's knee was on George Floyd's neck. 9 minutes and 26 seconds. So it is no surprise that the disproportionate nature of the deaths related to COVID-19 correspond to also the inequity in many communities of color across this country. Whether you're in California, whether you're in Oregon, whether you're in New York, whether you're in Texas, the data is unequivocal. So I'm going to ask our panel, and anybody can jump in here, knowing that we've had disproportionate impact on our communities of color, knowing that we've had disproportionate impact on the very communities that have historically been underserved, knowing that the 3 pandemics have all come to full fruition on our communities. What is your thought And what's your plan for addressing that disproportionality as we come into the new post-pandemic world? I'm just leaving it there. Who'd like to start?
I'll tell you the part that hurts me the most is that, you know, I recently tweeted out something about race and allowing kids to just talk about race in class. And I'm almost embarrassed to tell you how many responses I got that I wouldn't share with you about the reaction that I got from people. I'm from Italy. I moved to the United States when I was a child. And when I talk to my cousins in Italy about the racial things they see on TV, they can't wrap their heads around it. Like, they literally cannot fathom just how unjust this country is. And I think most of the world sees us that way, except many of us, which is shocking to me. One of the things I learned living and working in the South for 25 years is you cannot be afraid to talk about race. You cannot be afraid to talk about inequities, and don't walk around on eggshells. Walk around with the way I say is calm, assertive. Be okay with the fact that we don't have all the answers, but don't be okay with the fact that kids have the same discipline infraction and get vastly different responses based on that, right? And so that can't be okay. What's the policy that you can put in place to slow that garbage down? What's the policy that you can put in place to try to attract and retain teachers that look like the kids they serve? So they have hope and they can say, one day I want to be like Jose or LaTonya or Roberto, right? I don't have a good answer for this, guys, and that's the part that hurts me, but there is progress. Do not despair. There are people who are doing the good work, and I know we'll get there.
Thank you.
Dr. Carranza, I have a question for everyone that's still participating. Raise your hand if you've ever been racially profiled or in terms of gender, been profiled in terms of gender. I think the majority are raising your hands. And I think we have a special obligation, those of us that have been profiled, to really help others view the world through our equity lenses. Those 9 minutes were a great opportunity, but we can't lose that momentum. And I see that happening already. Trustees, Board of Education are all of a sudden, the budget has taken precedence. DEI has become a term that is just thrown around. Systems who aren't ready for it throw it around like if they're really going to enact it. So it's really up to us as leaders to make the change that's necessary in order to not let it drop the conversation and to raise the issue in a way that people will come around to it. People aren't to blame for their implicit biases that they grew up with. But they have to understand that they have them, and then it's our responsibility to help them mitigate those implicit biases. And again, I can say that my last 5 searches have resulted in people of color at both at the college president level and at the superintendent level being selected. One I'm most proud of is an African-American president was selected in a Latino college, so to speak, and where the majority of students are Latinos. And so we also have to work with our other people of color and continue to make those bridges. We cannot say, oh, it's just their fight. No, it's all of ours fight, as Dr. Avossa mentioned. So I would say that that's what we have to just sort of re-energize ourselves and say, si se puede, we can do this and we're going to make it better. I've told my SLA the story when I was racially profiled as a college president in Los Angeles, okay? 2 sheriff's deputies, guns on me, get out of it. And I'm parked in the sign that says college president. So I'm sure we all have those stories. So let's use that motivation. Let's get others to see through our equity lenses, and let's not let this momentum drop. We have an opportunity here. Gracias.
Beautiful. Zandra, LaTonya?
At the beginning, Richard, I was sitting there at 9:29. You had to say it twice because remember we were conditioned to believe that it was only 8 minutes and 46 seconds on the first video. Yep. And so, like you stated, we were in the middle of a COVID crisis, and then this was we know that these injustices, as everyone raised their hands, has been going on for many years, but it's never been on the video. And so when it was on the video, people had to really come to grasp what they truly believed about Black lives and people of color. And so what I can tell you is, I know that as a woman of color, I can no longer sit on the sidelines. I know that as a superintendent with, my grandmother used to say that to whom much is given, much is required. And so I know we have to keep our jobs to do our jobs, but we can do much more. And immediately after that, they wanted to know what was I gonna say? They didn't ask any other superintendents in Texas, but they wanted to know what I had to say about it. And so I wasn't really concerned about what I was gonna say. I was trying to figure out, what are we gonna do? And up until that moment, I had never come out and talked about equity because I thought it was an overused term, like innovation. I don't believe in putting lipstick on a pig and just jumping on the bandwagon. And so all of the work that we do, I think on this panel, is equity work. Without screaming, we're doing equity work. But one thing that we've got to be cognizant of, and I don't know what's happening in other states, but I can tell you what's happening in Texas. We're actually sending to our delegation in the Texas legislature, they're voting to not allow critical race theory to be discussed. And they're taking it with these amendments, which is gonna not allow us to talk about implicit bias, not allow us to talk about generational issues, not allow us to do a lot of the equity work that needs to be done. I can't speak for your states, but I can speak to it, what's happening in Texas. So when you look at all of our out of class placements, whether it's out of school suspensions, all of our discretionary placements, when you look at our dress codes, when you look at all the different things where our Black and brown students are, it's the consequences. But then when you look at the opposite, that's the truth. The placement in advanced academic courses, the placement in dual credit courses and different things of that nature. And so because there's some implicit bias on who people see when they see giftedness and who people see when they see a troublemaker. The fact that kids who look a certain way are allowed to do X, and the same kid, a Black kid or a brown kid, does the same thing that a white kid does, and they get a different punishment. And so I don't have to say all of that because I know you all know, but I don't know what's happening in your states, but there's definitely, while I want to believe, like our brother Robert said, that we're getting in a better place, I do believe that there's a silent assault that's making a wave across the country to help discourage us from making the progress that I think George Floyd's murder could have helped us or pushed more people to be aware of.
Zandra, what do you think?
Oh gosh, so much I want to say. Like when you just said the question, my heart started racing and my blood started boiling, right? Because we are entrusted as superintendents to take care of and nurture our children, and our parents of color trust us. They trust us to make the right decisions for their children. And I do not take that obligation lightly. And as my story as being a child in this community and how important that is. And so for me, the reason my blood starts boiling is because I start looking at the demographics of my children that I serve. And I never, ever want someone to make a decision about them based on the color of their skin. And I will go further as when the wonderful Dr. Cantú I was listening to, earlier, her speech about Odessa and Midland, Odessa and Lubbock, Texas and all that. That's where my family's from. My parents were born and raised in Snyder, Texas, my abuelos de Mexico, and my cousins still live in Midland and Odessa and Lubbock. And the reason we are out here, the reason I am in California is because of my father's experience with racism in West Texas. And he's a very dark-skinned Latino. My mother is a very light-skinned Latina. And so she had privilege, he did not. I am the youngest of 6. The oldest 3 experienced that racism. When my papa wanted to go get a haircut, they said, "We don't cut hair here." He said, "Well, there's plenty of chairs." "I'm sorry, sir, we don't cut hair here." My mother wanted to go into, take the children as a family to go eat in a restaurant, and were turned away because no Mexicans or dogs were allowed. That's my history. And so I understand, and I do not take the obligation lightly to serve my children. I now serve a community of many immigrants from Mexico, predominantly from the state of Oaxaca. If you know Oaxaqueños, they are very dark skinned, they are very short, and they do not have the same privilege. And some of my third generation Latinos will racially profile them as well. And so we have those conversations. I tell you all of this because it's so important for us to never forget our story and our obligation, right? And so then how do I use that? I use my privilege. You can see my color. I'm often mistaken for not being Latina. And so I can get through doors, and you betcha I'm gonna hold that door open with my big Latina stiletto, and I'm gonna let many more in because it is my obligation to make sure that that door stays open, right? It also is my obligation to make sure that I set up organizational structures and systems and conversations to ensure that we put a big spotlight on anything that does not allow our children to prosper. You see behind me the All Means All hashtag. So in my community, when I came here, I'm entering my 5th year as a superintendent, but when I started, we had a horrible master's schedule. And you can remember the days of study hall, extended studies. I inherited that. And I said, so where's the syllabus and where's the trajectory and how's that going to get them into the college door? Oh, well, you know, superintendent, that's what they need extra help with their homework. I said, no, they don't. No, they don't. We are not going to have pobrecito syndrome in Greenfield. We are going to do everything we can. We're going to work triple time to ensure that doors are going to be opened up for our children. And then we backwards map that. We said, if we want our kids to get into, we're here in California. I am an hour away from Google, Apple headquarters, the Silicon Valley. I said, my kids are getting jobs there. They're going to be they're going to be scientists. They're going to be computer science. They're going to be ripping open cell phones, and they're going to be recoding. So now the master schedule that we offer after year 2, I have medical detectives. I have computer science for educators. I have apps for creators. We have digital animation. We have robotics, engineering. We've partnered with Apple and Lego to bring in robots into and it's not just for the gate kids. If you remember, back in the day, those kids got the computers and those kids got the robots and those kids were in ESL. No, we're not doing that here. Every single kid deserves an opportunity and experience and a robot in front of them so that they can make the decision. If they don't want to go to college, that's their decision to make. But I'm going to make sure that the systems that we set up in place and we backwards map that into the industries that are prevalent here in Monterey County are going to be able to serve them well when they leave. And so all of those things is how we're going to break them free from that cycle of poverty, break them free from anything that is going to try to predetermine. Because I had many conversations my first year here with teachers, and they said, I don't want to teach those kids. They were happy with college prep track because the rest of them were just going to be over there. I said, no, that's not what you signed up for. No, we're All Means All. Everybody's going to have an opportunity, and your kid doesn't have to suffer for these kids to succeed. Everybody can succeed. And which one of you are going to call home and say, yeah, I've already predetermined that your child isn't college material when they're in 5th grade. We don't do that here. And so I don't have the same people on my team that I had 5 years ago. And that's okay. That is okay, because every single person here today that I do have on our team believes in that All Means All. Because if they didn't, I would happily invite them to resign.
That's awesome. I can't thank you enough. Man, I'm fired up. Like, let's go to work right now. So I know Dr. Leyba is going to have to leave as well. He's got his grandchildren. He's going to take them to celebrate. Family's always first. So thank you, Dr. Leyba, for joining us. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to end. We're already over, and I'm sorry about that, Patricia, but we could talk all day. So I'm going to ask our 2 sitting superintendents who are powerhouses, who happen to be women and women of color, showing us how it gets done. But I'm going to ask them, because this is the Florida Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. There are aspiring superintendents that are part of this panel, as well as experienced superintendents. But I'm going to ask our 2 sitting superintendents very quickly, 30 seconds or less. What advice do you give to that next man or woman that wants to be a superintendent? What advice would you give them? 30 seconds or less, go. We're going to start with you, Zandra.
Okay, boom. find an ally, find a colleague, lean in on people, network collegially. And I'm going to have to give a huge shout out to my sister circle, my fit leader circle. We are hermanas that just lean in when times get tough. And if you don't have someone to support you, you're completely alone. And I'm going to shout out to so many women, but there's two I see right here today. Lori Gonzalez is my sister from the Central Valley in California that I lean in on, and Heidi Baker, who gave me an opportunity to be here with you today. Love that girl too. And we lean on each other, and Patricia, you too, because if we don't, we are going to think that we're isolated and doing this all alone.
Great advice. LaTonya, what would you say, Madam President?
Ditto to everything, Zandra. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Zandra? Is it Zandra?
Yes.
Zandra, you are my new person. I think we've been in a room before, but you're amazing. And so all of you aspiring superintendents, you go follow her right now. She's on social media because I found her. You go and follow her, and you find all the other female soups and you follow them. Your mentor doesn't have to be in the room with you. You can watch them do great things. And I promise you, I call them sister soups, and we have sister soups all across the country. There is not a superintendent in Zandra, you correct me if I'm wrong, that if you call them, if you ask them for anything, they will provide it for you. Do not go at this alone, because I'm telling you, there's a good old boy system that's working, and not including us. There's another circle of other ethnic groups, and we're the last ones to know, and typically it's Black and brown women. And so as we think about what we can do, we can continue to put ourselves out there. In Texas, in Houston, Texas, and Patricia, you've got to meet her. You probably already know her, but Martha Salazar Zamora, she is amazing. She is my sister, like literally, she should have been on this call. And we only have one Hispanic female superintendent, Latina, in Houston. A area this big. That shouldn't be. And so we've got to strengthen each other, and we've got to help prepare one another. And then we just got to go for it. You're not going to get 100% of the jobs that you don't apply for. And you can't say, oh, they're not going to hire a Latina, or, oh, they're not going to hire a Black woman. You got to prepare, and you got to get ready. You have to stay ready, and lean on your sisters. And our guys as well, they give us really good information, but on the preparation and all of that, I promise you, there's not a person that's a superintendent, a female superintendent in this country that wouldn't answer your call for assistance.
That's right.
Wow, great advice to everyone. So I want to thank our panel. I want to thank Dr. Avossa. I want to thank Dr. Leyba. Obviously, our two powerhouse sitting superintendents, Zandra and LaTonya, thank you for your passion. Thank you for your dedication. I will say this to you, as a recovering superintendent, the hardest job in America right now is being a superintendent. That is the hardest job in America. If you don't believe me, look at how many superintendents have left the superintendency this year. So I want to thank you for your passion. I want to thank you for your dedication. I want to thank you for your leadership, but more than anything, I want to thank you for always keeping it real. I was honored to be on this panel and lead this panel, but I'm more honored to hear what you have to say. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our other Madam President, Patricia Trejo, to take it from here.
Muchas gracias. Wow, how inspiring, and what a privilege and an honor to be in the same Zoom room with every single one of you. You certainly are incredible and doing incredible work. And Richard, I mean, you always just know how to make sure that we're asking the right questions to get the right responses so that we're doing the right work. So muchas gracias. I am so appreciative to be among every single one of you, because like we said in our theme, Adelante, empowering all, promoting equity for all. And that's what it's all about. So muchas gracias.
Well, it is my pleasure to quickly introduce, as we close tonight, the inspiring Enrique Vela.
Thank you, thank you. I thought there would be fake applause in the background or something. Well, on behalf of Florida ALAS, our executive board, I just want to thank everybody who's still with us, everybody who participated, all of our sponsors, guest speakers, participants. And I'll just close by saying, stating the obvious, that Latinos are resilient, Latinos are strong, and we were really, really afraid at the start of the pandemic, when we started having to cancel one routine event after the other, that we would get disconnected. And, you know, I really want to thank Patricia Trejo, there's two of y'all now, and Ed Elements for really actually, during this time, I feel like we've had more events than we typically have, and we've maintained together and been able to involve primos from all over the country. And so I think that's just a statement of who we are and what we stand for. So with that, I thank you all. God bless you and have a great night.